right, just going to tweet this out. 2-minute warning, guys, so we'll let some people kind of trickle in here. Make sure this tweet went out. Looking pretty good. Hey Harbs, how's it going, man? Yeah, it's going pretty well. Have some Brady, which is good. In some ways, it's nice that Michelle kind of got stopped there at the 1 yard line, but anytime you can get a rushing touchdown from Tom Brady, it's a good thing, especially what his kind of salary was in Showdown. So yeah, how are things going for you so far? And at least we know the chat's working. That's good. Just give it a couple more minutes here, guys. We'll get started once halftime starts. Just gonna go through some stuff for week 5. Talk about the game so far tonight. Talk about some props that I'm on. See what my chances are of hitting those. And yeah, talk about kind of the streaming schedule going forward. Yeah, that's something that's kind of interesting so far. What they've done with Hines, he's got 8 carries, only 22 yards. So they've done a pretty good job with him. Pats are pretty decent actually at covering running backs out of the backfield. At least they were last week. So that's always a concern. Game script's on his side though. He's in a position where there's just not a lot of viable options there. So I definitely think that he was a really strong play if you're playing shutdown or showdown. So definitely on that. So yeah, we'll give it one more minute here, guys, and then we will kind of get rolling. Feel free and throw some questions in the chat. I'll definitely go over some of that stuff as we go, and then at the end we'll kind of do a little Q&A after I kind of go through what my initial thoughts are on the Week 5 slate. A lot of times I don't even really start my research until like Wednesday or so. So this is kind of like a first look for me at least, but got a decent amount of work done today. I just wanted to kind of start doing these live streams on Thursday. I thought it'd be kind of a fun thing to do during halftime. Of course, we have a review right when I go live. So I'm going to wait for some more people to kind of come through. But yeah, that's the plan. We're going to be doing a Sunday morning show per usual. I'm going to be doing it a little bit earlier, which I'll talk about when we get some more people here for the halftime show. Might as well bring the stream back up for this game. What's going on with this review, Harbs? Yeah, Green Bay, it's going to be a really interesting kind of decision that people are going to have to make because Aaron Rodgers is super cheap, as well as the backfield, like you said. Anytime that Cobb's out, sometimes I think that some of those pass-catching running backs are interesting. Aaron Jones looked pretty good last week as well. And then Aaron Rodgers at 6,300 seems really cheap. But, yeah, certainly we can kind of dive into that a little bit more. See if I can get the stream back up here for the Patriots game. What's going on with this review, Harbs? Oh, looks like we're first and goal now, so. You know, I figured starting this at the 2-minute warning would be the play, but maybe have to wait a little bit longer next week before I get this going. Ah, gotcha. Yeah, those are always kind of tough plays, right? The call they make on the field kind of stands. Even like 2 weeks ago, that Kamara play where he got stopped basically at the 1, but they called him down. I still think he was kind of in. And then Breeze obviously gets the kind of quarterback sneak touchdown on the next play. It was a pretty big swing for, I think, a lot of people that had Kamara that week. So it's kind of rough. I guess that's the way it should be, though. Anytime you just get kind of burned on a play like that, it's tough. Well, while we're here, so I'm doing a props article over at the Action Network for Thursday Night Football and Monday Night Football. So the two props that I went with today were Josh Gordon, under 3.5 receptions. As of right now, he has one target. So that one's looking pretty strong, minus 114 at Bet Online. So pretty standard there. I was just a little bit nervous with what kind of the target share was going to be like once Edelman came back, and then it's just always a little bit spread out. Yeah, there's an argument that Gronk would have been, if he was limited at all, maybe they try and get Gordon involved. It's just really tough. Gordon kind of dug into Dorsett's snaps a little bit last week. So Dorsett's snaps were down to about 70%, which was lower than it had been. But I think the biggest thing for Julian Edelman's return was it's the effect on Chris Hogan, because Chris Hogan's been playing mostly in the slot this year, a lot more in the slot actually than Dorsett. So he's only had 49% of his snaps on the outside, which is a really small number for a wide receiver like Hogan. He is a versatile guy, but I took the under on him as well, 41.5 yards. So it looks like he's at, let's check that one again, update it. So he's got one catch for 21 yards right now. So that one's a little bit closer than the first one. So looking pretty decent on props so far. This might be the longest 2 minutes of football I've seen in quite a while, of course, right when I go live. So yeah, thanks, Harbs. You bet props a decent amount or not a ton? By the way, everyone that's watching this live or watching this later, be sure and check out Harbs' channel as well. He's doing some really good lineup reviews that I've been making sure to watch. So definitely hope to see more of those. Yeah, the limits are really low on props. That's the only kind of thing about them, but they're extremely soft. So say you only can get a couple $100 down. For the majority of people, that's still a decent sweat, and they're super inefficient. So definitely looking at the props tool that we have at Fantasy Labs. I'll talk about it in a little bit. But yeah, the props tool is amazing. It kind of takes Sean Corner's projections. Obviously, he was the #1 ranker for the past 3 years, and then also kind of allocates a bunch of different books online and tries to find the biggest inefficiencies. So the props tool is premium, or else I'd be able to kind of show it to you guys. But yeah, it's one of those things on Sunday mornings that I'm trying to prioritize going through and finding props. It's kind of helped a little bit that I've been doing these articles on Thursday Night Football and Sunday Night Football, because those ones are easier to kind of attack with the way the slates are. But yeah, I want to focus a little bit more on props for some of the other sports as well. As soon as NBA gets rolling, definitely going to be doing a ton of props for NBA. But yeah, I'm really pumped about that. Yeah, we're going to be 30 minutes into the stream before this half ends. Yeah, see, the thing about props, I don't think they really put a lot of resources into them because, like you said, they don't have like a lot of, you can't get a lot of action down on them. So there's not really a ton of incentive on them. One thing that I do think is kind of sharp with props that I want to do a little bit better is on Sunday mornings, keeping an eye and kind of an idea of which ones are outliers, right? So if you've heard a lot of people talk about some sharp bettors that use props to make decisions in DFS, a lot of times what they're doing is kind of charting what a normal prop is. So, for example, say Zeke, his prop was 75 rushing yards in week one, 82 rushing yards in week two, 86 in week three, and then last week it's like all of a sudden pops up to like 93 rushing yards. That's an outlier that a lot of people are kind of taking seriously. And over time, it's kind of shown that that's kind of the way you should be using those props for your decisions in DFS. I was kind of on the fence about it for what I was just saying originally, just because I don't think the lines are super sharp. But you guys got to realize that they have so much information that they get throughout the week just because of how much money is coming in on which side of the props, right? So yeah, they're adjusting their props, but anytime that there's like a spike in something like that, that means they're really trying to cover their ass, basically. Interested in looking at that, those huge outliers, especially if they stay strong. Like I don't really need to look at a prop to make me get on like Geronimo Allison last week, considering that Cobb was out. He was a pretty easy pivot. But for when you're kind of making those tight decisions like last week, like maybe you're in between Zeke and Gordon, I definitely think that using those props can be a valuable way to go. All right. Gonna be a longer Thursday show than I thought, but it's all good. Always pumped to kind of hang out with you guys. Just want to continue to kind of grow this channel. I'll say it again throughout the stream, but be sure and check out Fantasy Labs. And then what I keep kind of looking at is our Action Network app. It's actually just amazing. Like check it out in the description below. No affiliates or anything like that, but the app is amazing. So I'm basically looking at kind of the way the drives are going, and then there's all the different stats, but I'm also looking at some of the bets that I have in as well as odds. So it's basically like the perfect app for if you like to bet on sports. So I'm basically checking this now instead of having like a bunch of different things on my phone like I used to have. So it's really solid. So yeah, we'll go over some of the games. Kind of there's gonna be a few games obviously that have massive ownership. Go position by position a little bit. Talk about what I think the early chalk's gonna be, and then I kind of want to touch a little bit on some of the pace that we're gonna see in some of these games. Wow, Ebron actually made a legit catch. Interesting. I'm actually just so pumped that he's not on the main slate this week because I don't have to feel like I had to play him as much. But yeah, Ebron's a tough thing. Like even the last couple weeks, his price is obvious. He was obviously way too cheap for the usage he was seeing, but it's just so frustrating to watch that guy drop passes in the end zone. Another thing after we get going in halftime here that I wanted to tell you guys about is I'm going to be moving my live stream on Sunday to earlier in the morning. Kind of working a little bit with Manny Laura and Ryan Hodge. They also have a Twitch. Sorry, yeah, they also have a Twitch channel. So their times, Manny's going on at 10 to 11:30 a.m. Eastern time, and then Hodge goes on right after him at 11:30 to 12:15 Eastern time. So if you're curious about having kind of that live experience on Sunday mornings, want to fire questioned off into a chat, I'll be kind of starting things off. I'm just kind of getting my feet wet on the morning, and then Manny and then Hodge, just a really good resource for you guys if you want kind of a more interactive experience on Sunday morning. So check out their channels. Both of them are in my description below. Be sure and subscribe to those guys as well. 32 seconds. Gosh, another target for James White, huh? Guy has 9 targets in the first half, 8 receptions. So, I mean, obviously, White was pretty much the nuts in this game so far. Edelman coming back, 3 catches. Hogan still under on the prop. Gordon still under on the prop. So I'm a happy guy right now. Harbs, have you checked out that stream yet of those guys? I pretty much like always had it up on Sunday mornings, and then like when I started doing these live streams, kind of missed being able to like chat with them and stuff. So I think they're really sharp. Yeah, I think it's kind of going that way on Sunday mornings. Like, yeah, you can read content, but what you guys have to realize is there's a ton of content out there, written content that's written on Wednesday and Thursday. But a lot of times, like the real value, like there's decisions that have to be made on Sunday morning, right? We have news that comes through. So a lot of people are still building the majority of their lineups on Sunday mornings. So what I try and do is I think that you can obviously intake a lot of that content throughout the week, but finding a live stream that you like doesn't even have to be mine. Obviously, like you said, Al Smizzle has a great live stream right before lock, which is obviously extremely popular, and then Manny and Hodge, both of those guys. So it's not even it's more of a community, right? You want to be able to ask questions, kind of bounce ideas off of each other, especially when late news really does happen. A lot of times it can kind of really change the slate. So it's something that I'm really interested in continuing to do. I'm going to be one of the earlier ones, obviously. So I'm hoping that I kind of just get a bunch of people that are kind of just starting their morning. And that's kind of going to be a good way for me to kind of get into the swing of things as well on Sunday morning. So really excited about that. Still not halftime. Yeah, for any of you guys that have been sticking it out the last 10 minutes, I'll make sure I wait a little bit longer to go live next week. This was kind of a test run, but I really want to wait until you get a few more people in here before we kind of start talking about the slate, just in general, and then the news and notes. Yeah, Geronimo was definitely the pivot that a lot of people were on last week. I think it kind of depends on who you pivoted away for on how that went for you, right? Like there was a little bit of the morning where I was considering moving from Boyd to Allison. I'm glad that I didn't do that on my main team, but I think that that's a pivot that some people made. Obviously, if you could have played both, that makes a lot of sense, depending on what your lineup construction was at for that point. I'm sure Shepard was locked in for the majority of people's cash teams. But yeah, the Allison thing, he was a lot higher owned at higher stakes, right? So that's something that you definitely have to consider. So one of the things that I do like to look at as soon as kind of all the games get going on Sundays is our ownership page at Fantasy Labs. If you're not familiar with that, it kind of generates the ownership in kind of the larger, smaller stakes, and then the mid stakes, and then kind of you can compare them, right? So a lot of times there'll be guys that are much higher owned at the higher stakes than in, say, the Millie Maker or something like that. So generally, you can kind of see where your leverage is, and then also kind of get an idea of which plays were sharper from a kind of a GPP and leverage perspective. So. 24-3, man. I thought the Colts would put up a better fight, especially how well their defense has been playing lately. Obviously, a tough spot going into Foxborough, but yeah, this is kind of surprising. Another field goal for them. 24-3. Harbs, do you play any sports besides NFL? Nice. I don't know. Under 51 was one of the ones I was looking at today too. I've been trying to stick to more of the player props, but I still try and fire it at least a couple of the kind of game bets as well. The under 51, I was there for a little bit of the day. I ended up not going with that. I kind of just went with a couple more player props. But yeah, I don't think the under was bad, especially because of how good Indy's defense has played lately. They've been doing a good job of getting pressure. Just a lot of kind of question marks from a DFS perspective from the Patriots. It was kind of a tough one to analyze because what I was talking about earlier with what the target share is like in for that team right now. So, all right, finally halftime. Yeah, NBA is great. Really pumped for NBA to start. And then yeah, hockey. Obviously, the majority of the content that I'm doing now at Fantasy Labs, at least like the written content, is going to be hockey this year. But the majority of my action is in NFL every week. But I'm probably going to ramp up things for NBA as well. So yeah, that's going to be fun. I got a bunch of really cool stuff planned for hockey and NBA for the channel. So excited for that. But people kind of trickling in here. Yeah, so just wanted to kind of start doing these Thursday shows, give you guys kind of like my initial thoughts on the slate. Most of the time I'm starting my research on Wednesday and then moving through Thursday, kind of get a more broad perspective of the slate. I think I actually have a pretty good handle on things so far, which is good. Be sure and check out Fantasy Labs and the Action Network. Both links should be in the descriptions below. Again, guys, no affiliates or anything like that. I'm just like trying to get you guys to where I think the best tools are. And then obviously going forward, going to be doing this Thursday night halftime show, as well as I'm moving my live stream on Sundays to a little bit earlier. So it's going to start at 9 Eastern time. And then want to urge you guys to check out Manny, Laura, and Ryan Hodges live streams as well. So Manny's going to go on. They're both on Twitch. Again, both the links are in my description. Subscribe to both of them. Manny goes on at 10. He goes like roughly 10 to 11:30 Eastern time. Goes right into Hodge at 11:30. And then I'm sure a lot of you guys watch Al Smizzle's show up until lock as well. So that's kind of the lineup. I think there's a lot of value in at least having some back and forth with people on Sunday mornings. So yeah, check out Manny and Ryan's Twitch channel. Give them a sub. Also, if you guys, yeah, thanks for the sub, Flying Higher Cards. Yeah, while you're at it, guys, do me a favor, subscribe to this channel, hit that like button. Just trying to like kind of grow the community a little bit. Really want to kind of get this off the ground, just to kind of get a little bit more interaction with you guys, talk about content, talk about the slate, just in general. Talked about it before, but I'll touch on it quickly. Doing a props article on Thursday Night Football. And then Monday Night Football. Today I've got Josh Gordon under 3.5 receptions and then Chris Hogan under 41.5 yards. So looking pretty decent on those so far. But yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit about the slate now. Kind of let some people trickle in. That's totally fine. You can always watch this. I'm going to post all these on the YouTube channel as well. So you can go back and fast forward through me being dumb, I guess, and starting the stream at the 2-minute warning. Seemed like a good idea at the time. But yeah, so as far as the slate goes, there is 2 games that have really high totals. The Atlanta Falcons versus the Pittsburgh Steelers. Yeah, it's really, that's where a lot of the ownership's going to go. That's where a lot of the game stacks are going to go. But there's not a lot of cheap guys in this game, which is a little bit concerning. And then obviously the biggest spread so far is this Rams and Seahawks game, but nothing too big. We've had a couple weeks in a row where we've had some double-digit spreads with those Bills games, so it's going to be a little different feel of the slate like that. So yeah, let's just kind of go through some of the positions, and then as well, guys, any questions you have, I'll feel free to keep an eye on the chat as well. Doesn't have to be about DFS, just anything in general. You want to talk football, what some things you'd like to see with the live shows. I'm open to doing pretty much anything. So yeah, my first kind of thoughts on the slate at quarterback. Do think that Ben Roethlisberger is really interesting given his price point. Talked a lot about kind of what the prices are like at quarterback now. It's totally different than what it used to be like. Paying all the way up for quarterback used to mean you're spending 8K on DraftKings, and now we're getting these guys in like the high 6K ranges. One thing I will say though is the range is a little bit different. The last couple weeks it's been like 7K, 6,900 down to like the 5,600 range. We have a few guys that are considerably cheaper this year that are still reasonable. Like Russell Wilson's at 5,100, Derek Carr at 5,200. I do think that they're kind of interesting. And then kind of in the mid range, we have guys like Matt Stafford. So it's going to be kind of an interesting week at quarterback. I don't typically worry a ton about ownership. I do think that paying a little bit more for Ben makes a ton of sense in this game with the high total. It kind of gives you access to some of these weapons that are extremely expensive. Like Juju is not that much cheaper than Antonio Brown, which is something that I was kind of surprised about. But at the same time, Juju's just been seeing massive usage. So he's all the way at 7,500. But I still think he's going to be massively owned. People are going to want to stack up this game. And that's a good way to do it. I think there's going to be a decent amount of people that just go to Juju that can't quite get up to Antonio Brown. But I mean, just looking at his target share, 11 targets, 19 targets, and 8 targets, like Juju's seeing insane usage. It's pretty crazy, honestly. So definitely think he's a solid play. Kind of on FanDuel, I'm looking at Blake Bortles. For some reason, I'm always kind of looking at him on FanDuel. I really like the rushing equity, of course, that comes with that. But I guess the Kansas City Chiefs this week, I just think it's going to be a really interesting situation for Bortles. It all depends if you think that KC is going to be able to score points on Jacksonville's defense. But Bortles at 7K gives you a lot of savings. So kind of interested in that. The problem with him is usually who you're going to pair him with. So that's something that we're going to have to kind of work throughout the week. Mentioned Russell Wilson quickly before. I don't think we've seen his price tag this low in quite some time. It's tough because we used to roster Russell Wilson because of the weapons he had, because of how much he would use his legs, but he just hasn't been rushing a ton this year. He's like he had so I was trying to pull up his numbers for rush attempts last year quickly. Okay, so 5.9 rush attempts per game last season. That's definitely down this year, and that used to be part of the intrigue with Wilson. So I'm a little bit kind of hesitant even to go there in a game that I don't necessarily love against this Rams defense, but I do think that people will kind of go there for the name value at points this coming week. But that's kind of it. I'm really on this like high tier range of Ben Roethlisberger. I think Aaron Rodgers is still probably too cheap. Cam Newton, and then if you want to go the other side of this game, Matt Ryan. I think that's pretty much it at quarterback at this time. If you really want to go cheap, I probably like Stafford the best in the mid to cheap range. So kind of looking at that. At running back, you can pay up for Todd Gurley. He's extremely expensive, right? So it's all going to kind of depend on what you do with this Philly game. Harbs mentioned in the chat, like there's going to be a big decision between Juju and James Conner. I totally agree because their price points are pretty similar, right? And James Conner, like Pittsburgh's kind of shown this ability to like totally drop the running game and just pass. They're the third heaviest pass ratio in the league, which is something that is somewhat new. So interested in that. Todd Gurley at 9,400. I think you'll probably get him lower owned than some of these guys in the mid-range. I think that he'll be probably lower owned than Melvin Gordon. He'll probably be lower owned than Christian McCaffrey. Both really good plays for significantly cheaper. So we're talking about McCaffrey. He's $1,400 cheaper than Todd Gurley. So yeah, I think that that's something to think about, especially on the main slate. McCaffrey, he's probably projected behind Gurley and Gordon, but his reception floor is just absolutely insane. So I really like the idea of going after McCaffrey. He's one of the top guys in my model right now. I think that we really kind of need to adapt in some ways. Like on DraftKings, it's always been favorable, obviously, to get these pass-catching running backs, but I think the role is even more insane than we kind of realized. So I think that it's almost a must at this point to get for not just floor. Like I'm not even just talking cash games, like your ceiling. I think that you have to have a guy that can catch passes and have to like have someone that's significantly involved in these game plans. So I think McCaffrey is one of the better plays on the slate against this Giants team. James Conner at 7,500. I still think he's interesting. Like it's obviously a really solid matchup against this Falcons team that we've been targeting for a lot of these pass catching running backs each and every week. So you'll hear people talk about it. Like I don't need to harp on it too much. The Falcons defense basically just lets these running backs catch passes, right? And then they try and tackle from there. They were absolutely shredded by McCaffrey. They were shredded by Kamara, and then they were shredded by Gio. So it's just something that it's not just through the passing game so far, though. They've been giving up a lot of yards on the ground as well, 119 rushing yards per game. So I think there's a really decent floor there for Connor. I think he's definitely one of the top plays you have to consider in this game. One thing kind of on game stack, so we're kind of talking about this Falcons game a little bit. I definitely think that they're a little bit more contrarian than people realize. So I'm definitely looking into that, those full game stacks. So wide receiver, I get the Julio Jones intrigue. Calvin Ridley, last couple weeks has done really well. It feels kind of chasey. I think kind of at the next tier is what I'm looking at, down from Julio a little bit, kind of in the AJ Green to Juju Smith-Schuster, maybe even Jarvis Landry type range. And Adam Thielen, like that's a really condensed target share in Minnesota. Thielen's on pace for just an insane amount of targets this year. So really like the idea of going after him. If you do want to go to Russell Wilson, Doug Baldwin's still super cheap. But it's not a great it's not a great matchup, I guess, but at the same time, Kirk Cousins just did go nuts for them. 3 TDs, I think over 400 yards. So it's not it's not a matchup that Baldwin can't be successful in. So one of the things with Green Bay, I wanted to touch on that quickly. So with Geronimo Allison questionable with the concussion, it could end up being Marquez Valdes-Scantling, probably next in line for that role, and Cobb's still doubtful. So at that point, 3,300 for Scantling makes a lot of sense. At least tournament viable. A guy that we're playing in the preseason a lot. Rest in peace, NFL preseason. Harbs, I agree with you on Thielen, man. Like even like in week 1 and 2, like we knew that that's where all the targets were going to go for Minnesota, right? But for some reason, 2 weeks in a row, they were just under-owned, winning people GPPs. Could be a sneaky spot for that with everyone on this Atlanta-Pittsburgh game. Maybe people kind of don't end up playing the Minnesota guys because this team total is down quite a ways against Philly. Definitely think it's a really good spot to attack them, though. Tight ends, I think probably the only play I'm looking at in this Jaguars game would probably be Travis Kelce. You can kind of get a decent amount of targets, obviously, but that's kind of where Jacksonville funnels targets, right, to the tight end position. It's going to be interesting to see how Mahomes reacts to this elite Jacksonville defense. It's somewhat scary, I guess, to pay up for Kelce against this team, but it is a pretty decent spot for him. Be surprised if he doesn't pay that off. So Jared Cook is a guy that I want to talk about. His price is kind of getting up there on DraftKings, but only $5,900 on FanDuel, which is super cheap for his role. Definitely think that it's a good spot against this Chargers team. But yeah, they're a team that's been decent still against tight ends this year. They're actually first in DVOA. I didn't realize that as I brought it up. So yeah, Jared Cook, maybe that's why he's so cheap on FanDuel, but I'm still kind of looking in that direction. But as far as like the really cheap guys, I'm kind of still on David Njoku. Didn't totally work out last week, but I kind of want to be early on the Baker Mayfield thing. Ricky Seals-Jones is always kind of a guy that I'm considering, but that offense has just been sputtering, obviously. And then Austin Seferian-Jenkins is in a decent spot in this game against the Chiefs defense, who just really can't stop anyone. I really dislike targeting tight ends versus the Chargers. Yeah, the Kittle thing, like he had a lot of his points on that one big play, right? So it's more of a usage thing with Cook. He's just getting such a decent amount of their target share that I think he makes sense from kind of a volume perspective, but I don't think I can really go there on DK where he's, let's see what his price is on DK. 4,800. Yeah, so there's a lot of guys probably in the cheaper range that I prefer. So looking at defense, I think the cash game defense is probably between the Eagles and the Ravens. So the Vikings are 27th in terms of pass blocking this year, according to PFF. They've just been relying, or they've been allowing a ton of pressures, 27 already this year, just from Riley O'Keefe alone. So Cousins is pretty decent under pressure, but he's still going to take sacks, and the Eagles' pass rush is one of the best in the league. So kind of interested in Philly, kind of on the other side of I guess, talking about those Minnesota weapons. And then Baltimore, just a team we've been targeting a decent amount. So I'm trying to see if there's anything else a little bit cheaper that I like. FanDuel, the Titans look pretty cheap. They're against the Bills, so I think that's a game that's not going to have a ton of plays. So before this game gets rolling again, it looks like it's about to kick off. Want to touch on pace quickly. So that's one of the things we have over at Fantasy Labs is projected plays, and that's kind of the argument for Bortles. Bortles in Jacksonville is projected for the most plays on any team in the slate, and then Baltimore right behind them, and then Pittsburgh. So those are some of the teams that I'm looking at as far as the play volume. So it takes into account pace, it takes into account passing plays, because obviously the game's just going to slow down a little bit when there's incompletions, right? So I do really like to look at this projected plays metric when I'm thinking about my game stacks. A lot of times it can kind of lead you to some games that might go under owned. So last week, looking at this projected plays metric, I was really high on the Indy and Houston game, kind of led me to some of those stacks. So I think that's something you can look at. I'm looking a lot more these days at pace and kind of what's happening at the offensive and defensive line. I think there's a lot of times people kind of get roped into these matchups, DVOA, that kind of stuff, cornerback matchups. I honestly think pressure is a lot more important than both of those things. There's certain quarterbacks that perform extremely well under pressure. Aaron Rodgers comes to mind, especially when he's mobile, but there's also quarterbacks that just absolutely crumble when they're being pressured. So I think that the one thing that you guys have to kind of, if there's one thing that you dig deep into your own, kind of in your own research, I would say maybe spend a little bit less time looking at cornerback matchups and DVOA type stuff, and spend a little bit more time on, just from a broad perspective, what you think is going to happen at the line of scrimmage. If you think the quarterback's going to be under pressure all day, that affects some of his pass catchers, right? Like, there's not going to be enough time for those guys to get downfield. So I think that that's something that I'm going to focus on personally, and I would kind of recommend you guys do that too. And yeah, that's pretty much it, guys. I'm sure a lot of you guys are going to go back and watch the rest of this game. It's been kind of an interesting one so far, I guess. I wish it was a little bit closer, but I'll be keeping an eye on my props. Again, I've got Gordon today under 3.5 receptions, and then I've got Hogan under 41.5 yards. Be sure and check out the Action Network. Obviously, our app is phenomenal. And then Fantasy Labs, of course. And then if you guys missed the announcement earlier, going forward, going to be doing this Thursday Night Football show, as well as moving to kind of like the early morning slot on Sundays. My two streaming buddies, Manny Laura, Ryan Hodge, be sure and find them over on Twitch. So I'm going to go on at 9 a.m. Manny's going to go on around 10, and then Ryan Hodge at 11:30. And then I'm sure a decent amount of you guys are going to roll over to Smizzle stream right after that. So definitely recommend Manny and Hodge. But yeah, your Sunday morning at 9 a.m., have a coffee. Let's kind of get our feet set together for the Sunday morning ahead. That's kind of the plan. We'll talk some props. We'll talk some game stack type stuff. Talk about the chalk, whatever you guys want. All this is for you guys. All I ask is that if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. Maybe throw a like on there. And yeah, just spread the word about the channel. Just want to kind of get the community going. I think these are going to be really awesome once we start to get some more people, kind of get the word out, get the conversation going in the chat. Thanks for coming, Harbs, and asking some questions. Check out Harbs' channel as well. And yeah, good luck kind of on your research process the rest of the week, guys, and we'll see you on Sunday morning. All right, good talk. See you guys out there.